Poverty. It's an issue that has seemingly always impacted the world. In particular, it is very prevalent in American society. Everywhere we look, the world around us, the media, entertainment, we see multiple different perspectives of poverty. Common perceptions typically focus in on the most extreme cases of poverty, such as starvation and homelessness. But this begs the question, do most impoverished Americans actually live this way? And how should we define and measure poverty in the United States? As we define poverty, we need to ask, why do we want to eradicate poverty? The answer? Because we want to preserve the dignity of all human beings. We recognize in each other someone who deserves more than just survival, but rather the opportunity to actually live. So we have to create a definition based off of something other than their material existence. We define poverty as the lack of capabilities based on insufficient financial resources. Capabilities are what people are able to do. When people don't have enough money to even have the option to do various things, they are impoverished. For example, if someone does not have the money to be able to eat, they are experiencing a lack of capabilities based off of financial restrictions. When discussing how to measure poverty, there are two major approaches. One of them revolves around looking at people through numbers. Their incomes are assessed along with how many people are in their family. With this comes at looking at how much people have in both physical objects and money. The other sees people as people, using numbers, but looking more into how they live their everyday lives, including what they are able to do with their available resources. First, let's discuss the mainly numerical approach. According to John Iceland, poverty is economic or income deprivation. However, the current definition or measure used by the government to determine who is in poverty in America is the OPM, the official poverty measurement. This system, created by Molly Orshansky in the 1960s, takes the amount of money people need to spend on food to have a nutritious but monotonous diet and multiplies it by 3 in order to determine the poverty threshold, or the minimum amount of dollars it takes a person or a group of people to meet their basic needs. If a person makes more than the threshold, they are not considered poor. If they make less, they are considered poor. The OPM in itself has a multitude of pros and cons. In terms of the pros, it is easy to understand and straightforward. You simply take what you have to spend on food and multiply it by 3 to get a number threshold. After that, you adjust depending on the amount of people in the household. Pre-tax income is also used in this calculation. Relative to other definitions, it is quite simple. Yet, because of its simplicity and the fact that it's statistical in nature, there isn't much flexibility involved. There are various other expenses that come with life, such as childcare, that aren't considered necessary and thus are not included. This means that people are simply labeled with a number, which is not ideal. When talking wealth, another perspective is the one of Robert Rector, though instead of focusing purely on wealth through money, he discusses a person's wealth through their materials and objects. Rector implies that the way most people think of poverty in the United States, such as homelessness and starvation, is not the case for most people who fall beneath the poverty line. For example, according to Rector, the typical poor household as defined by the government has a car and air conditioning, 2 color televisions, cable or satellite TV, a DVD player, and a VCR. He continues to ponder, are people actually poor if they have these objects, or does the current OPM include too many people? Can people be poor if they have gaming systems or refrigerators in their house? These questions are raised by Rector, and they're important because the view people have of poverty in the U.S. can be seen through a narrow lens. But the short answer of these questions is yes, people can have these material objects and be poor.
These methods of defining and measuring poverty completely miss the reason why we are interested in solving the problem in the first place: human dignity. They base their definitions solely upon such numbers as how much money one managed to make or how few amenities they can survive with. And although these quantities are easily measured, they are too easy to encompass what it really means to experience poverty. As previously mentioned, when defining what it means to be impoverished, we are concerned with more than simple statistics. Our concern is instead with people and their dignity, which is why we can't look at others and only see their income and array of assets. Where we see people who are struggling and want for them to have fulfilled lives, considering only the bare minimum is insufficient. The problem is looking through a material lens, which is why people can have more amenities than is absolutely needed and still be poor. In order to treat every person with respect, we need to consider human lives more holistically, recognizing that everyone deserves not only the financial resources to survive, but also be fulfilled. To consider people with the dignity they deserve, we look to the writings of Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum. In Sen's work, we find that in talking about humans, we should be speaking in terms of their capabilities, and in Nussbaum's, learned which are considered essential for preserving human dignity. Sen tells us that capabilities are what people are able to do, and Nussbaum recognizes essentials such as bodily integrity, which is being able to move freely, including being secure from sexual assault, and affiliation, which is being able to live with and toward others, along with a number of other capabilities. Given the proper resources, humans are capable of so much. They're capable of emotion and imagination, of good health, and enjoying recreational activities or receiving an education, as well as living with and caring for other species or living amongst those which are a part of our environment, and even more. However, not everybody is able to enact all of these possibilities because access requires money, and a lack thereof can affect one's ability to achieve all of these capabilities. For example, limited in the ability to pay for proper health care or medicine, one may be barred from the possibility of good health. And if one is not healthy or able to care for themselves, then they're not able to have attachments to anyone or anything else. Financial security is required to allow one the time for living out those other capabilities. As such, money plays a key role in accessing these achievements. When such deprivation of capability comes from a lack of financial resources, this is what we define as poverty. So in short, money matters. This is why we should start as soon as possible with a system that is far more accurate in reflecting the reality of how much it costs to live than already exists, the SPM, or Supplementary Poverty Measurement. And by making modifications as well as creating additional measures in following their definition, we would account for as many human possibilities as possible. The SPM is a good starting place because it solves many problems of our current system by taking more into account. Firstly, instead of enforcing a rigid family structure, anybody sharing resources within the same household would be considered together. It recognizes that taxes on income are not available to the household for other uses, and neither are non-discretionary expenses like transportation to a job or childcare. Such costs are in fact necessary to keep money coming in order to pay for such survival needs as food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. But is there more to life than eating, wearing clothes, and having a roof above one's head? The SPM reaches the extent of its utility right around here. But considering the life of the kid, is that enough? Even with those basics covered, a child needs more than what exists in an individual household and within its income. So what more is needed and what modifications can be made to the SPM to account for them? A child, for example, needs to play, breathe clean air, and interact positively with others. For these, one potential measure for approaching child's access to play could be determining where there is a lack of playgrounds in the area. In addition to creating such measures, we would like to add to the SPM listing additional measures such as the Human Development Index, which tracks education, life expectancy, and more, to include further factors. The Gender Development Index, which is designed to measure gender inequality and can be used to adjust the SPM based on who's making the money in the household, in addition to ensuring a measure of environmental control, from political voting to land holding rights. Instead of seeing people as numbers, like in the statistical approach offered by Rector and the OPM, we see people as people, by looking through the lens of capability. From this dignified perspective, the more accurate SPM, with modifications and additional measurements, can be used to infer human capabilities.